Human Rights Watch has condemned Tanzania's violent response to protests that followed last week's disputed election. Security forces reportedly fired live rounds and tear gas as opposition supporters took to the streets, accusing authorities of rigging the polls. President Samia Suluhu Hassan, re-elected with over 97% of the vote, blamed foreign agitators for the unrest. Rights groups and international observers have called for an investigation into the alleged killings and urged the government to restore trust in its democratic process. So at this time, we're joined by Levi Mboushou, who is our political analyst. Levi, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tim. The pleasure is mine.
All right. So pre, during, and post-election, how would you describe Samia Suluhu Hassan, the president, that is the first female vice president even, that actually eventually became president of Tanzania after the death of John Magufuli?
I would describe her, sadly enough, as a politician who became, who was vomited by her people. She's that politician who initially everybody counted on her. She was like the East African Mother Teresa. She was hailed by many. She was welcomed by many as a female politician. Everybody loved her. She was the enfant chérie of the East African community and of SADC, given that I think after Joyce Banda in Malawi, she was the next female president who came in. It's true, she came in under not too comfortable circumstances following the untimely death of John Pombe Magufuli. We expected that she'd get into Magufuli's shoes and come in with the sweeping reforms that Magufuli started in Tanzania. And when she came, she brought an iron fist. She rallied the army behind her. She made the army crack down on protesters. This is not the Samia Suluhu that we expected. We expected her to come in with sweeping electoral reforms. But what did she do? She jailed Tundu Lissu for insurrection just because he called for electoral reforms. She sidelined plausible contenders to the presidential race. She jailed some, outclassed some, shoved some aside. So I don't know that President Samia Suluhu would have the credibility it would take to run the country, both in country itself and within the region. So she is not the enfant chérie that we thought she would be. She has come in with this, particularly with this crackdown. We all wonder whether close to 800,000 souls that have perished mean anything to Samia Suluhu at all.
Well, just as you have said, Samia Suluhu Hassan was once praised for, loosening political repression. Now, how did that image even change so drastically based on what you're saying now? Or probably she was misunderstood? Or are we looking at a leader that somehow, caved into circumstances that were beyond our power to manage?
Not so. There is something that happens to power, unfortunately so. We had hoped that in that part of Africa, Samia Suluhu would have been inspired by the philosophies of the likes of Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere, Kenneth David Kaunda, but looks like she became used to the trappings of power. And we say it all the time, power corrupts. We had hoped that power wouldn't corrupt Samia Suluhu. Unfortunately, from what we see on the ground, absolute power did corrupt her, absolutely. So I guess it's the trapping of power. The fact that she rose to power, and in the process she built a system around her that decided to look away from the will of the people, but to look at the mounting oligarchy that she had built around her. It became a hegemony, it became a caste around her, and the trappings of power, as I said before, was something that she could not grapple with losing. You can't be deaf to your critics all the time, because that's it in politics. She forgot that these were political adversaries. They were not opponents. They were just people on the other side of the political divide. She didn't want to listen to them. And there was this phobia of losing power after clinging on to power just for 4 years, from the time John Pombe Magufuli left us. So I guess it's this power play, wanting to cling to power tenaciously, power at all costs, that blinded her to the will of the people. If you find a lady, people say that they had hoped she would have the heart of a mother, she would listen to the people around her, she would listen to the electorate. But when you come to a game of politics, and then you want to sideline everyone, you want to sideline every plausible contender and listen to no one, then you become a slave to power, and that's the corruption that we see with her. Now, I'm just glad maybe we'll address that in the next couple of questions that you were. I wanted to say something about the play, the interplay of the power play between her regime as it is now and SADC.
Yes, please go ahead. Let's have an understanding of how that plays out. I mean, probably we can understand what led to what, and probably find a way around it, if possible.
The way things are playing out now, SADC has come out to say that they don't like the way she's doing things. They don't like the way she decided to crack down on her political opponents. They don't like the way she closed her eyes to the protest from the youth, from the masses. We saw this team gather even next door in Kenya, and this could even eventually spill over into Uganda, of course. Uganda itself, Kaguta Yoweri Museveni is heading a repressive regime itself. But this thirst for power and the taste of power and the propensity to always become repressive, this is not the Tanzania that we expected her to lead. This is not the Tanzania we had expected her to come up as a beacon of political righteousness and show the example and shine the light. Because mind you, this is Nyerere's Tanzania we're talking about. So everybody is asking, if Mwalimu Julius Nyerere were to turn in his grave, would this be the kind of report card he would like to see of his beloved Tanzania? No. If the founding fathers of this part of Africa that have gone before us and gone before the likes of Samia Suluhu were to turn in their graves, is this what they would have loved to see? No. So now, eventually, Samia Suluhu will lose international acclaim. Already SADC is beginning to vomit her. The East African community will follow suit. Now, we think that the only people in whose good books she would remain are Western interests, Western superpowers who would want to have an eye on their interest in Tanzania. Of course, they would come out and voice perfunctory concerns, but on the whole, we fear that eventually Samia Suluhu will lose the credibility that she wants to, she hopes to get abroad with international bodies like Human Rights Watch that are already condemning her, international bodies like the United Nations themselves, superpowers like the United States, the United Kingdom, and maybe even China and Russia. But then if she doesn't play this card well, a lot of blood has spilled on the streets of Dar es Salaam and in parts of the country, in Dodoma and elsewhere. The report card is not good. The story is somber, and we think that it's just about time that she sits up and addresses this conflict as it is, particularly going to what we call analyzing the root causes. She needs to do root cause analysis in order to be able to do the kind of damage control we hope she does before she takes over the baton and lead Tanzania.
All right, so I'm just listening to you, Levi, and I'm just wondering, can there be any consequences for bad behavior, so to speak, when we see African leaders perpetuate themselves in power and crack down on voices of dissent and those who are actually demonstrating against them? We've seen what has happened in Kenya. We've seen a part in Nigeria, a part in Ghana. Senegal at some point were able to get it right and have their man or their person in power. We're seeing it play out in Tanzania. We've also seen parts also of that in Uganda. Now, who gets to hold these people accountable, aside from SADC and all these regional bodies, even the AU and some other regional bodies that seem not to be talking?
Unfortunately, these bodies are toothless bulldogs, I would say, because in a place where the people, in a country where the people remain docile, in a country where the people decide that they are going to be spectators, a time comes when the people who have been spectators for too long, they'll need to rise up and hold their leaders to book, and take them to and hold them to account and make them answer for the wrongdoing. It's sad enough. We wished we had in Africa strong institutions. And I believe that these leaders, when they come, it is in their interest, it's in their macabre and diabolic interest not to put in place the kind of strong institutions, because they know that the stronger the institutions would be, the more they would be able to be accountable to these institutions. It's sad enough across the board, be it in Gabon, like you say, you didn't mention Gabon, but be it in the Gabon as we knew it before today, in other parts of Africa, in Nigeria,
even
in Cameroon, in La Côte d'Ivoire, in Uganda. What would explain the fact that Bobby Wine is continually being picked up and put in jail, and nobody bats an eyelid? And the leaders tell you that they were born to rule, nobody could rule by them, and their acolytes will tell you that this is the man sent from God. And then we sit and then we wonder, are these people telling us that, God forbid, if something were to happen to this leader, if they were to these leaders, if they were to suddenly go upstairs, does it mean the country would die with them? Certainly no. So my take is this: if the people, if the masses would be the only people to call these people to book, then so be it. A time comes when it was the people that stood up in Burkina Faso and said nay to President Blaise Compaoré at the time. It's the people that stood up recently in Madagascar and told the president enough was enough. It's the people that stood up in repressive regimes and said no to their president. We've seen the people power in next door Kenya. So the Kenyan politicians themselves, they are sitting up, they're trying to put in place reforms that will not anger the people. They know the people power. They take that into consideration. We see that in the Cameroons today. The repressive regime that's there is trying to take into cognizance the people power, and they don't undermine it. So I want to answer your question. I would say that the power to topple these sit-tight, bad governing leaders and leadership lies in the hands of the people. If they could remain mobilized, then they would be the answer to Africa's long-standing political issues.
But then one will still ask the question, how many lives will need to be lost? How many people's blood would have to be shed before accountability and justice and good governance is given to the people? We see a country like Tanzania that we've seen reports come out to say that security forces opened fire and used tear gas on protesters. According to reports, we're seeing between 700 and 1,000 people already suffered casualties. And you just asked the question, do African leaders really understand the concept of democracy?
Partly no. And I want to take the international community to task. If the international community were to put the people, were to put humanity at the center of their interest, and not just economic, geostrategic, geopolitical interest at the center of what they do, or at the center of what they tie down to these regimes as their interest. If they were to have humanity, then they would act differently. Then they would stand up. Then the African Union, the SADC, the EAC, and other regional and international bodies would rise up and condemn what was happening. In serious places, they would even sever ties with these regimes, because it's unfortunate, it's unacceptable that a president, though elected, even though legally, but who lacks the legitimacy, would decide upon herself or on himself to walk, to swim through blood to get to the presidential seat. How does that even begin to sit in with you? Do you care? Unfortunately, no. Does the international community care? Unfortunately, no. But I want to say that if we begin to have in place stronger institutions, coherent condemnation coming from these bodies and from these persons, then it will begin to send a warning. It's a clear message that be careful, watch how you treat your people. We don't like this. This is no democracy that we find in Africa. Democracy doesn't mean that you sideline or you push aside everybody you think is a plausible contender, and then you bring in wishy-washy political turncoats, and then they come with a semblance of democracy, and then you beat them and you come up with this kind of Soviet Union kind of scores of 99%, and then you say that you were voted into office.
Okay.
And the question we ask that in Tanzania, we ask that in Cameroon, if these people came out to vote for you in their masses, then what explains the protests on the streets? Why do you send the army to crack down on people? Are you afraid of the people who voted you into office? This is paradoxical. And I think that somehow it's a clarion call that the world is sending to international bodies. You don't align with these people, they take their distance from these people and make them know that we don't agree with the blood you are allowing to spill in your streets. And by the time one superpower does it, the second does it, the third does it, then things will begin to change.
Okay.
We don't want to caution, sorry, I'll end by that. We don't want to caution a situation where there is a leader butchering his own citizens on the people, and then we find some kind of romance between this leader and Western leaders.
Okay.
This is uncalled for. This is unacceptable. I'm beginning to be happy with what we see in the Cameroons. Some president is said to have been elected. There is an outcry from the clergy. There is an outcry from the civil society. And when we draw the parallel to next door Ivory Coast, where the superpower, the United States, sent a message of congratulations to President Ouattara, but that's absent, not only from the US, from UK, from the France. We don't see that in the Cameroons.
Yeah.
To some extent, even though it's still garbage in, garbage out,
now,
to some extent, it speaks to the collective conscience of the global international community.
Okay, so now, Levi, just in 1 minute, some people have said that these international bodies or institutions that you mentioned are quite hypocritical in their stand with political regimes, with regimes or democratic settings in Africa. Now, we see Samia Suluhu Hassan, who is blaming foreigners for inciting the deadly protests. Is there an undertone as regards maybe some foreign powers fueling instability in Africa that it's given the leverage for these leaders to perpetuate themselves in power and cause, this chaos that we're seeing?
Yes. Sadly, the answer is yes. E.W. Gladstone had said that nations don't have friends, they have interests. But one begins to wonder, what is that interest that would come above human life? I don't want to say human life, I want to say human lives. To the extent that a group of people, a community, be it international or regional, would not mind seeing thousands of people die just because they want to keep a particular geostrategic interest in a country, and they are aware that they would prefer to side with these leaders just so once swearing in is done, they start coming on the table, they sit on the dining table with these leaders just to keep their interest. So as a matter of interest, yes.
All right,
unfortunately
Levi,
so.
You've actually confirmed some doubts. All right, let's just hang it there. But then we must appreciate you, Levi Mboushou, our political analyst, for sharing your thoughts with us, of course, on the show. Thank you.
Thank you very much.